Storm clouds strangled the Ouagadougou sky as Traoré stood alone at immigration. No entourage, no ceremonial dress, just battle-worn fatigues with threadbare elbows. A solitary guard maintained distance, almost invisible in the gathering darkness. The ambassador's jet crawled forward, its European insignia gleaming with imperial arrogance on African soil. Traoré sipped a bitter made-in-Africa drink, gaze fixed on the descending stairs. "Let him walk unescorted," he commanded. "Let him feel our earth beneath his feet." Ambassador Laurent emerged, designer shoes meeting tarmac with disdain. "A freak," he muttered to aides, "always difficulties and discomfort." When offered water by a local soldier, he scoffed, "I've brought civilized refreshments." Laurent glanced at Traoré's austere attire. "Security personnel, retrieve my luggage." Traoré stepped forward, voice deadly quiet. "Ambassador, acknowledge whose soil you stand upon." Laurent laughed sharply. "Soil? This remains France's backyard." Lightning cracked the horizon as Traoré's voice sliced through humid air. "Kneel, apologize, or watch your aircraft burn." The ambassador's knees struck concrete as cameras captured history unfolding. Burkina Faso collectively exhaled centuries of subjugation. Later, addressing the seizure, Traoré simply stated, "We don't request dignity anymore. We claim it." Traoré stood motionless as the jet engines wound down, his silence more commanding than any shouted order. The bitter hibiscus tea in his metal cup, locally grown, defiantly unrefined, left stains like blood on the rim. His eyes, unnervingly steady, tracked the aircraft's every movement with the precision of a predator calculating distances. Those who served under him recognized this stillness, the calm that preceded his most devastating decisions. 3 days earlier, French intelligence had intercepted his private communications. 7 hours ago, Paris had issued demands. Now, Traoré waited, permitting the ambassador's arrival not as diplomatic courtesy but as tactical advantage. History's weight pressed against his shoulders. He bore it without visible strain. "Your Excellency?" A customs officer approached, voice barely audible above the dying engines. "Security protocols suggest we escort the French delegation from the tarmac. Shall I arrange an official welcome?" Traoré sipped his tea deliberately, the gesture unhurried yet precise. His response came soft but crystalline. "Let him walk unaccompanied. Let him feel each step on sovereign ground." A pause, heavy with calculation. "Let him believe he arrives among supplicants." The officer hesitated, sensing deeper currents beneath simple instructions. "Sir, diplomatic protocol suggests—" "Protocol," Traoré interrupted, the word like a blade, "was written by empires to domesticate the colonized." He set down his cup with surgical exactness. "Today, Burkina Faso writes new protocol." Wind whipped across the tarmac, carrying dust from villages where French-owned mines had displaced farmers for generations. Traoré inhaled deeply, drawing strength from ancestral soil. His single bodyguard, a woman whose family had been executed during the last coup, stood 20 paces back, hand resting on her weapon with deceptive casualness. "When Laurent sets foot here," Traoré continued, "he believes he enters conquered territory. Let this illusion persist." His lips curved slightly, not quite a smile. "The powerful reveal themselves most honestly when they believe no one watches." Lightning fractured the distance. The customs officer recognized the look in Traoré's eyes, the same expression he'd worn before executing colonial collaborators on national television last month. Not rage, not hatred, but something far more dangerous. Absolute clarity of purpose. "Africa's patience," Traoré whispered, "ends today." Ambassador Laurent emerged from the jet's cabin with practice theater, adjusting gold cufflinks that cost more than a Burkinabe teacher's annual salary. His tailored Savile Row suit remained pristine, despite the 12-hour flight, a living monument to European exceptionalism on African soil. He descended the stairs with the casual entitlement of a man who had never questioned his right to occupy any space he desired. "A freak," he sighed dramatically to his entourage of pale-faced advisors, nostrils flaring at the heavy air. Always the same suffocating heat and predictable headaches. One would think after a century of guidance, they'd have mastered basic infrastructure. His French carried the particular Parisian accent of those educated at École Nationale d'Administration, the breeding ground of colonial administrators for generations. A young Burkinabe soldier approached, offering a silver tray with locally filtered water in a hand-carved wooden Cooper, traditional gesture of welcome reserved for honored guests. Laurent glanced at it as if presented with sewage. "Non mercy," he said, lips barely moving. "I never consume unverified substances outside the embassy. We're not desperate enough to risk." Local accommodations. He pulled a monogrammed flask from his breast pocket. Swiss mineral water. Civilization in a bottle. The soldier's eyes flashed momentarily before military discipline reasserted itself. Laurent noticed and smiled thinly. "Your enthusiasm for protocol is commendable, boy. Your superiors have trained you adequately." Surveying the modest reception area, Laurent's displeasure crystallized. Is this genuinely the entirety of the welcome? No honor guard? No diplomatic corps? He checked his Patek Philippe watch, another ancestral artifact, purchased with resources extracted from the very continent beneath his feet. Paris assured me President Traoré understood the significance of this visit. Where is the red carpet? The ceremonial procedures? The basic diplomatic courtesies? His chief aide leaned in. "Sir, remember the briefing. Traoré is deliberately flouting conventions to make a statement." Laurent dismissed this with a wave. Childish theatrics. They play revolutionaries until budget season, then extend their begging bowls. He raised his voice deliberately, ensuring it carried. African independence always ends with the same predictable hat-in-hand routine. Noticing a figure in fatigues watching from immigration, Laurent squinted dismissively. "Security personnel," he called out, voice dripping with condescension. "My luggage requires immediate attention. 6 case handle the crocodile leather with particular care. It's from your continent, but processed properly in Marseille." He turned to his communications director. "Document this reception. The development minister should see what his generous packages fund theatrical defiance without basic diplomatic competence." Laurent straightened his tie silk, woven in Lyon from Malian cotton. "Let's expedite this unpleasantness. I have a dinner engagement in Paris tomorrow, and one can only tolerate performative sovereignty for so long." "You there!" Laurent called, gesturing with manicured fingers. "Security personnel. My delegation requires immediate assistance with diplomatic materials." His French was deliberately unaccented, each syllable a tiny colonial flag planted in African air. "Fetch my luggage and arrange transportation to suitable accommodations." The surrounding officials stiffened. A deathly silence enveloped the airfield. The customs officer who had spoken with Traoré earlier took an instinctive step backward. Traoré moved forward with measured steps, the distance between them shrinking with each footfall. When he spoke, his voice carried the quiet certainty of a man who had executed traitors without hesitation. "Ambassador Laurent," Traoré said, using the title as if holding something distasteful. "You stand on sovereign Burkinabe soil. Before official business commences, acknowledge this fundamental truth." Laurent's laugh sliced through the tension, sharp, deliberate, weaponized. "Soil?" He glanced pointedly at the ground beneath them. "My dear uniformed representative, this remains France's shadow. Your nation exists by our tolerance." He brushed invisible dust from his sleeve. "Your economy survives by our generosity. Your leadership," his eyes deliberately scanned Traoré's modest attire, "serves at our discretion." Traoré didn't blink, didn't move. His stillness became something primal, something dangerous. "I have served 3 French presidents," Laurent continued, warming to his performance. "I've watched African revolutionaries come and go. All eventually understand reality. This continent requires European guidance." He tapped his leather briefcase. "I bring instructions from Paris regarding your recent, unorthodox policies." Traoré's voice, when it finally came, emerged with the cold precision of a surgical blade. 3 generations of my family died in French uranium mines. My sister's children starve while your corporations extract our wealth. Regrettable individual circumstances, Laurent shrugged, checking his watch. Perhaps if your people embraced proper governance. You mistake me, Traoré interrupted, each word a controlled explosion. I'm not seeking your analysis. This isn't a dialogue between equals. His eyes locked onto Laurent's. You've mistaken the security personnel for the president of Burkina Faso. The blood drained from Laurent's face as realization dawned. This misunderstanding is unfortunate. Laurent recovered, extending his hand. Let us reset diplomatic. No reset, Traoré said. Only recognition. Only atonement. The atmosphere crystallized into something primordial as Traoré and Laurent faced each other on the tarmac. 3 centuries of colonial history compressed into a singular moment between two Manon in battle-worn fatigues, the other in European finery. Traoré's solitary bodyguard shifted her weight imperceptibly, fingers drifting toward her holster with deliberate restraint. The movement registered in Laurent's peripheral vision, piercing his diplomatic armor with the first needle of genuine fear. Thunder rolled across the horizon, swallowing what remained of daylight. The air hung motionless, saturated with humidity that refused to break as if the elements themselves awaited resolution. Sweat tracked down Laurent's temple, the only betrayal of his eroding composure. "I believe we've indulged this theatrical display long enough," Laurent announced, his voice carrying an authority that had opened doors across 4 continents. He adjusted his silk tie with practiced nonchalance, a gesture performed in presidential palaces and royal courts worldwide. "My diplomatic credentials are in order. I represent the French Republic. Now, where is my driver? The embassy will be concerned by this irregularity." 3 meters away, Traoré remained motionless. Something ancient and terrible passed behind his eyes, not anger, but something far more dangerous. Absolute clarity. When he finally spoke, his voice emerged with the quiet precision of a man who had calculated every syllable's effect. "There will be no driver, ambassador." Laurent's diplomatic training faltered. "I beg your pardon." "No embassy security detail. No diplomatic immunity." Traoré's words fell like stones into still water. "No pretense." Nervous laughter escaped Laurent's lips. "This posturing violates 17 international protocols. Paris will." "Paris," Traoré interrupted, the words slicing through humidity, "is 7 hours away. You stand on sovereign Burkinabe soil." Laurent's jaw tightened. His hand moved unconsciously toward his phone, then froze as he realized the tarmac had silently filled with soldiers. Not ceremonial guards, but battle-hardened fighters with empty expressions and loaded weapons. They had materialized from nowhere, yet seemed to have been present all along a carefully orchestrated revelation. "What precisely is the meaning of this?" Laurent demanded, voice rising half an octave. "The consequences of detaining a French diplomat will be—" "You misunderstand," Traoré said, each word measured and inexorable. "You are not being detained." His eyes held Laurent's with unblinking intensity. "You are being judged." The air between them vibrated with unspoken history: colonial extraction, puppet governments, assassinated revolutionaries, manipulated currencies. "No more lies," Traoré continued, voice dropping lower. "No more diplomatic theater." Lightning illuminated his face in stark relief, revealing an expression not of rage but of absolute conviction. "You have one choice, Ambassador of France." Laurent's diplomatic training abandoned him completely as Traoré delivered his ultimatum with devastating simplicity. "Kneel." Laurent froze, disbelief paralyzing his diplomatic reflexes. The command hung in the air between them, impossible, unthinkable. His lips parted, forming words that emerged as barely more than a whisper. "You joke." The statement carried no conviction. "This is diplomatic theater gone too far." Traoré remained motionless, his gaze unwavering. 3 centuries of exploitation is the theater. This moment is reality. Laurent's training reasserted itself. He straightened his shoulders, summoning the authority of a nuclear power. "I represent the French Republic. This is an international incident that will—" Traoré's hand rose not in threat, but in signal. The gesture carried ancestral weight, as if reaching back through generations of resistance. From the perimeter of the airfield, a battalion of soldiers materialized from the gathering darkness, moving with synchronized precision. Not just any soldiers, veterans of Mali and Niger campaigns, their faces bearing witness to French military interventions across the Sahel. "Your republic," Traoré said, each word deliberate, "has extracted 5 trillion francs of minerals from our soil since 1960. Your corporations control our currency. Your intelligence services have assassinated our leaders." Laurent's diplomatic veneer cracked completely. "This is outrageous. I demand safe passage to—" "You demand nothing," Traoré interrupted, voice dropping to a register that seemed to vibrate in Laurent's bones. For once in 300 years, France will listen. The soldiers moved closer, their formation tightening with practiced discipline. Behind them, Laurent noticed something that drained the remaining color from his face. Local television cameras, broadcasting live to a nation that had endured generations of colonial manipulation. "You have one choice," Traoré continued, gesturing toward the concrete at his feet. "Kneel and apologize for centuries of exploitation. Or watch your aircraft burn and explain to Paris why you sacrificed a €40 million jet for your pride." Laurent's security detail reached instinctively for weapons that weren't there, confiscated during landing procedures they had dismissed as routine. "This is beyond madness," Laurent attempted, voice cracking. "The diplomatic consequences will be real," Traoré finished. "As real as the consequences we've endured for generations." A moment stretched between them, empires rising and falling in the silence. Laurent's gaze darted from the soldiers to the cameras, to his vulnerable aircraft. When his knees finally struck the concrete, the impact reverberated beyond physical sensation. History itself seemed to shudder. The ambassador of France, representative of a former colonial power, knelt before the leader of what European media called the poorest nation on earth. "I," Laurent began, were failing him. "Apologize," Traoré commanded, "for the extraction, for the assassinations, for treating our sovereignty as theoretical." The cameras captured every syllable of Laurent's mumbled apology. As the words left his lips, something shifted in the cosmic balanceno, just in Burkina Faso, but across a continent that had watched its resources vanish for centuries. Traoré nodded once. "Now Africa hears you." The footage exploded across global networks within hours. Raw, unfiltered, unprecedented. "Kneel for Africa" dominated worldwide trends for 17 consecutive days, the single most sustained hashtag movement since the Arab Spring. Paris initially dismissed the incident as manufactured theatrics until Traoré released the unedited 30-minute confrontation, including Laurent's stammered apology. The French government recalled their ambassador overnight, leaving behind his diplomatic credentials and 6 Vuitton suitcases now displayed in Ouagadougou's Museum of Colonial Resistance. European financial markets trembled as similar confrontations erupted across former colonies. In Senegal, citizens surrounded the French military base, demanding immediate withdrawal. Mali's leadership cancelled uranium contracts worth billions. The CFA franca currency, still controlled by Paris, faced its most serious challenge, as 7 nations simultaneously announced a transition to the Pan-African Monetary Union within 30 days. When Traoré confiscated Laurent's private jet, France threatened severe economic consequences. Traoré's response became legend. He ordered the €20 million aircraft dismantled, its components distributed to rural agricultural collectives. The engines now power irrigation systems in drought-stricken regions. The fuselage transformed into mobile medical clinics serving villages where French corporations once extracted gold without building hospitals. At the United Nations emergency session, European delegates demanded sanctions against Burkina Faso for diplomatic violations. The African bloc, joined unexpectedly by representatives from the Caribbean and South America, stood in silent solidarity during Traoré's address. His words, delivered without teleprompter or notes, reverberated through chambers that had historically prioritized Western voices. For centuries, sovereignty has been theoretical for nations like mine, recognized on paper, violated in practice. We have been instructed to request dignity through proper channels, to speak politely while our resources vanish. Those days have ended. He paused, surveying the chamber with unflinching conviction. We don't beg dignity anymore, we claim it. Within weeks, 17 resource extraction agreements across West Africa were forcibly renegotiated. The French Foreign Ministry established a colonial reconciliation committee, while publicly denying any connection to Traoré's actions. Underground movements from Martinique to Madagascar adopted his words as rallying cries against economic neo-colonialism. Academic institutions worldwide incorporated the Ouagadougou moment into decolonization curricula. When asked later if he had planned the confrontation's historical significance, Traoré's answer was characteristically direct: history isn't planned. It emerges when someone finally says, "enough," and means it. Brothers and sisters, this moment belongs to all Africans fighting for true independence. Like, share, and subscribe to Pan-African Renaissance for more untold stories of our continent's unstoppable awakening. The revolution will not ask permission, it will simply arrive.